and I felt way out of my league, so I eventually gave up on it. But we've known each other for about that long. I've been here for 37 years, and I think 37 years, and that's how long I've known Yosaif. And he's developed a tremendous following. He's a wonderful photographer. He's a spectacular teacher, and he's been a good friend for all these years. So it's really a pleasure for us to have him here this evening and have him talking about sort of a summary of, he's been teaching for 38 years, so I guess I got him in his first year, something like that, according to what he just told me. He said he was teaching for 38 years. So I can only imagine how much he's developed since. I've seen him in action sometimes. And we have the benefit now of that experience. He's sort of semi-retired from Tzalel, where he's been teaching all this time. He's still teaching one class in a subject that he calls street photography, which is not exactly what everybody else thinks is street photography, but it's certainly worthwhile. It's very interesting. So we'll be talking. He'll probably speak about that a little bit later. We're thinking of trying to organize a workshop. We're not exactly sure how it's going to work out. And we'd also like everybody here to know that we have a workshop coming in December 17th and 18th in Hanukkah in Mitzpeh Ramon, 2 days. And you can get information if you haven't received it already in your mail. You can get information from us. You can sign up. You can whatever if you're interested. And we hope that we'll get enough registration, and that'll be a fun activity. We've done that before. We had one of our first workshops was 3 days in Ramon, in Maktesh Ramon, and we'll be back in that area again. So that's about it. Yosaif, are you ready?
Just about.
Okay. He's putting out some work in the other room that he wants to talk about. And you can see what generation he's from. He doesn't know about digital slide projectors. So, which is just as well because they really look not so good. I miss the old slides. So, the quality just is not the same. So, that's it. So we'll just have to wait for Yosaif until he's ready. I can't ask if there are any questions because I didn't say anything.
You're on, Yosaif.
Too stripping.
Maybe for you too.
And that's your pay.
So first, I'm going to thank you all for coming. It's an honor to me that you've come. My wife Judy is here too, and that makes it more special for me. And our son Tal, who is going to do the documentary part of this project. It's a very strange thing to try and put together 50 years and make some kind of sense of it, because life is not linear. It kind of runs in all different kinds of directions at the same time, and you have no idea what's going to happen 5 minutes from now. It's like that classic joke of, how do you make God laugh? And it's a Yiddish joke, and the answer is, tell him your plans. So to be able to put together 50 years, I think it would be a lot easier to put together, or a lot, well actually it's a lot easier to put together 50 years than to put together 20 years. Because to put together 50 years, you probably forgot most of it to start with, so it's a lot easier. If you had 20 years to put together, you'd remember it all. But we do remember highlights and things that, although I might not remember, you know, my children's names and stuff like that, you do remember things from your childhood and important landmarks, and she's smiling, she knows it's true. The different stages which we constantly remind ourselves of in our development as people and in our professions, our personal life, all other kinds of directions also. So I'm going to try and make some kind of sense out of it and try and put together the different key points which have brought me to where I am today in photography in terms of my own work as a photographer and my own work as a teacher, because for the last 35 plus years I've been teaching at the Bezalel Academy in Jerusalem and some other places. And all of this together is part of what I am today. It all has affected my photography, and my photography, of course, affected my teaching. I'll start when I was a student in grade school, when I was about 12 years old, and I discovered my father's darkroom in the basement. In the States, you have these basements that are unfinished, or part of it's unfinished, and that's where you have all these secret things that are happening. And I had a corner blocked off, which was my father's darkroom. He had stopped doing photography when I discovered this darkroom at the age of 12. The family was a relatively large family. There were 6 children at the time, and he no longer had time to work in the darkroom. But I did find out afterwards that he took a course in New York City, probably when I was about 2 or 3 years old, a course with Bernice Abbott, who is this marvelous photographer and one of the great photographers in American history, who is not quite well known enough about her work. Her work is marvelous, and it really should be studied much more than it is today. She is the one who's responsible for saving Atget's negatives. She bought the whole pile of them when she was in Paris, and without her, most of his collection would have been lost. She was his assistant for a while in the darkroom, if I'm not mistaken. And that wonderful collection is because that was something that talked to her and affected her work very much also. So I started at the age of 12. Dad, would you please show me what this place is? It's got all this exciting machinery and a larger, a red light, and all kinds of chemicals. I mean, when you're a kid, it's this magic, you know. So he said, okay, went, bought the chemicals, papers, and he kind of showed me the basics. I didn't realize at the time that the safe light wasn't safe and the paper was getting fogged from the safe light, but slowly I figured a lot of these things out. And I was developing negatives and prints before I started to really photograph, because it was a fun thing to do. And of course, afterwards you follow in the yearbook photography as photographer for the yearbook, and college the same thing. And by the time I finished my bachelor's in biology, I was with 3 different cameras, 3 formats, 35 millimeter, 2 1/4, and 4x5. All of which I could process on my own in the darkroom without any real solid knowledge. And at that point, I had to figure out a profession. You finish Yeshiva University, and your options are either biology, which I knew was not for me because I could never remember any of those Latin names. One of the most horrible tests that we ever had was to go around the microscope room, and this guy, Professor Wischnitzer, who wrote the textbook and was a wonderful biologist, his idea of a test was lining up 20 microscopes, and you go around the circle, each one's pointing to something, the name of the slide is covered, and you had to tell what the Latin name was of whatever the hell it was that you were looking at. And you had to know, of course, what you were looking at. What a nightmare that was. to remember those names, and it was the same in many of the courses. I had to make a special deal with Wishnitzer to pass me on the course because he wanted to fail me. He called me into his office with the electron microscope in the other room, and he says, you know, I've got a problem. He says, you got an A in theory, and I want to fail you in the real part, which is all of the mechanics of the whole thing. Because we had a teacher who was interested in the beauty of biology, and he didn't care less about the names and stuff, and he was in the clouds, and I loved it. And, I didn't know any of the names, he didn't care about them, so we did fine. But in the other half, so he agreed to give me a C if I promised never to be a doctor or a biologist or whatever it was. I said, I got no problem there. I'm not interested in killing rats and cutting off frog heads to get their brains out intact or their heart or whatever it was. I said, I'll do very well just with the knowledge that I had in biology. It was wonderful studying. I sure as hell don't want to be in a lab doing that stuff for the rest of my life. It was great. Everybody should study biology. It's wonderful. But I had to choose a profession. And it was between what they teach you in Teachers Institute, be a teacher in Jewish studies, or, on the other hand, be a rabbi. You know, it was one of those options. And any other option, figure it out yourself, because biology was obviously not what I wanted to do, nor be a biology teacher. I wanted to come to Israel and live here, and I knew it then. I knew I wasn't going to be a Hebrew teacher here. It's pretty funny being a Hebrew teacher here. I still can't speak Hebrew perfectly. Or Tanakh or anything else. And at that point was the beginning of something that was going to develop more and more in my life, which was that choice between two sides of your brain. I loved photography. It was something that was on a subconscious level, and you can only understand that later on in your life. And I had to choose between something like that and something which was the other side of the brain, which was logical. It was what you were taught. It was what you should have done. You're a Hebrew teacher. You can be a good teacher. You can be an assistant rabbi. Maybe you can be a pulpit rabbi. I didn't want any of that stuff. I mean, it was fun. It was a nice idea. I mean, I was an assistant rabbi when I was studying photography afterwards. But I had to make that decision and that choice between two different directions. And the critical point was when I was at Yeshiva University in the summer, and it was pretty late to decide about studying in the rabbinical school, which was another 4 years of solid Gemara, and I shouldn't really tell you this because Tal's studying more Gemara now than I ever studied. And it was a rainy summer day. There was nobody there. It was the campus up in Washington Heights, which was nothing to really brag about. And I had to go to the Dirty Spoon restaurant to have lunch there. I mean, that's what we called it. And I said, I can't do 4 more years of this stuff. I just can't do it. And the test that I took with one of these rabbis with the beard and the whole business, he was one of the, in the Gemara department of the rabbinic thing. He said, well, he says, you didn't do so well on the test, you didn't do so badly either. I was kind of used to that, you know, you're kind of on the border of passing and failing. So he says, spend the summer studying, we'll talk about it at the end of the summer. I said, I gotta know now. He says, I can't tell you now. He says, come at the end of the summer. The following night, I was on a plane to Rochester to enroll in Rochester Institute of Technology and study photography. There I had a problem. It was too late. You know, it was the summer. Everybody's enrolled already. So we all were going. There was a couple other people who were interviewing. We went for the interviews. The guy before me said, I want to study here. I want to be a portrait photographer. They said, go work with a portrait photographer. That's the best thing to do. You don't have to come study here. And the same thing with the other two. And I realized that's the wrong answer if you want to get in here. And I said, I really don't know what I want. I want to study photography. I don't know enough about it. I should have realized that that was a key to something that I teach today. That kind of an answer. Because one of the big questions that I couldn't answer, and they asked this question, and they went around the class, why are you doing photography? What is it, why do you want to do it? And I would squirm because I didn't have an answer for it. Today I can give a whole dissertation on it, but that's after many years of trying to figure out your emotions and feelings and photographs and what's special about them. Believe me, coming from a yeshiva background and going into basic photography at RIT in photo illustration, because that was the closest it was to the closest department to fine art that they had at the time. They had 3 departments, and this was only the one that was closest. One was illustration, one was photochemistry, that surely wasn't for me. One was professional photography. I wanted illustration because it was close to the fine art. Today they have a 4th department, which is the fine art of photography. But I didn't know why, this question of why, and that's something that today, after all those years of trying to use the other side of the brain, which is the logical side, and to put words around it, and to find that dialogue between both sides, that which is kind of unconscious, subconscious, whatever you want to call it, the kind of things that you would find in that wonderful book called Man and His Symbols by Carl Jung. The first chapter is a must for everybody, because when he talks about the subconscious, take out the word subconscious, put in the word art, and you'll get a really good understanding of what art is all about. These images that you don't really understand, that are coming from another place. That's what was special. The idea of discovery and learning and all of that thing is something that's going to happen later on in my career. So I started studying photography. I chose my heart and my soul over logic and what I should have been. And it was the same thing that you've got in the famous Robert Frost poem of choosing the path that was less taken. Is it? Which is it? Am I wrong on the path that wasn't taken? The one that was a little bit, kind of less worn. Why? Because it was something else. And he says that's what made all of the difference. And to me, it's made a great difference in my life. It was probably one of the best decisions, that I could have made. It worked out well. So when I came to Israel after, we got to get to the master's program, that was critical because I studied 4 years. There are 2 years since I had a BA degree. First 2 years, I started undergraduate. First year I got an A because I was an amateur for many years, and so if I didn't have a good answer for one of the assignments that I had, I took out some of the stuff from my file, printed, and they liked it because I knew they were good pictures. And I did okay the first year, but the second year I was a C student because I couldn't go beyond all the stuff that I had done, and I had no idea how. We got assignments in the first year of photography that were wonderful for a beginning student. I mean, they were an ego trip. Take the logo of Life magazine, cut it off the cover of a page, and paste it onto your photograph, onto your 11 by 14 print, and now you've got the cover of Life magazine, whatever you want. Wow, that's great. The next week it was going to be Sports Illustrated. And then do something else that showed how smart you were, and you're already a photographer. This was a great ego trip, but today I look at it as one of the worst things they could have done, and one of the most damaging things that you can do to a student by giving them such a subject, giving them such an assignment. And that's what I had to unlearn over the many years. But it took a while, because in the second year of being a photographer already, with all that ego, and with all the idea, well, just express yourself, just go take it a little step further. It's just a question of going that one step further. You're always, you have a whole life of experience and knowledge. Use it, express yourself, say something about the subject that you're going to photograph. In this case, it's going to be Crest toothpaste, because you're doing an advertisement. What the hell can you say about Crest toothpaste? What is there to say about it? So you can think in terms of still lives and all that kind of stuff, and copy all the different people who did things, and lighting, and make a pretty picture. And that's what you could try doing. Or other assignments that they would give us. And it was basically how to do, or what to do. It was always accenting the product, the photograph, the picture. And after, in the second year, I got my C. And I realized I'm stuck because I don't have talent. I really don't know how to go further. And I know that I have nothing that I can say beyond what I've already said. How do you go that step further? And you ask your instructor, well, you have to figure it out. You know, everybody has to figure that out for themselves. Well, that sounded like a logical answer now. But when I look back at my studies there, I fail all of my instructors. Although they were on the verge of failing me, they were doing the best that they could. Some of them were wonderful people, and I give them a lot of credit for what they were trying to teach. But they didn't know much more than I knew, a lot of them. They were just in the profession, and I wasn't. I didn't study with Minor White. He was at that school a little bit before me. I missed him by maybe 2 or 3 years.
But there was nobody that came after him? It was,
After
I
Minor
was going to
White?
ask you about Minor White.
During the time that I was there, I don't remember any instructors that were of any major influence in the 4 years that I was there. Some of them were good photographers, but I don't think they had that extra.
But they didn't try and replace that viewpoint that Minor White had.
Well, Minor White had a very interesting and very religious kind of approach to photography, and he had a Jewish student that did just the opposite, of course, because what's a Jewish student going to do with Minor White? He did exactly the opposite. That was Jerry Uelsman. But he had charisma, he had an approach, and he was into something beyond the print. It was something in the Zen, it was something in that mystical thing. At least he wasn't talking about the product, he would talk about something else. And that would have been of influence. At the same time, there was also another school which had started, and that was Nathan Lyon's school, the Visual Studies Workshop, which was a marvelous school, but I would have no idea why it was marvelous. I wouldn't have chosen it if I knew about it. Today, I know it was an opportunity I missed, but I didn't have the tools to know what he was talking about. And he was talking about the right thing. They weren't talking about the results. They were talking about the whole process and the whole way of thinking as opposed to the product. Visual Studies Workshop. It wasn't about photography. It was about something else. And I didn't understand that. In any case, when I finished the second year at RIT, they opened up a Master of Fine Arts program, and the requirements were either a bachelor's in photography or a bachelor's in anything else, but with 2 years of formal training in photography, which I had just finished. The second year student with a C and a bachelor's degree. So they announced this program quite late. And you know, in America, they plan 10 years ahead. You know, the kid's born, they plan his bar mitzvah, and they already, you know, they've got it written down, and they've got a hall for his wedding. But they announced this program, I think, in December. By the time people learned about it, it was January. And that was good for me because they didn't have too many applicants, because if they would have had enough applicants, they wouldn't have chosen me. But I had enough of I had the requirements formally. I went to an interview for it. It was Yosaif Cohain, you know, do we take this guy or not? And they probably said, you know, he's Jewish, give him a chance, you know, something like that. Or I don't know what they figured, but they accepted me in the program. Later on, my advisor, when I finished my final project, my advisor tells me, he says, I want you to know I voted against you. And I kind of smiled. I was going to tell him, well, you don't hear what my vote about you is either, because at that point I was kind of angry when I finished my master's degree. The first year in the master's degree, I worked on the waterfront, the place where shore and water meet. I don't care where it is. Being in Rochester, the closest thing was Lake Ontario. It was a disaster. Never photographed that shore. There's nothing to photograph there. If you're looking for, you're smiling, you know, I guess. If you're looking for pictures, don't go there. Go to Montauk Point, go to Point Lobos. That's the great place. But don't go to Lake Ontario. But it was good in a way because there was nothing. And I failed that year. I got a C. You know, like they couldn't fail. It's the first class, you know, first master's class. You can't fail the 6 students you've got in the class. I mean, what are they going to do with you? They're going to have 2 people left after me. So first year, this was really bad work. It was stuff that if I showed it to you and I wanted to bring it, I just can't find it. That master's thesis has been going around to different places, and I don't know where I last put it. So basically, the first year in the thesis, I was doing waterfront. It was garbage. The print quality was poor, and the photograph was poor. But at the end of that year, I noticed something special. There were a couple of photographs that were acceptable. I liked them. They weren't great. They were nothing you really want to show, but they were done with a 2 1/4, and the print quality was quite poor, mediocre. That was what they were able to teach us. They didn't know how to print better themselves, or they would have told us. You know, the discussions on the prints were always about print quality and what mat board you put them on. Because you would show 3 or 4 pictures, and people, I don't like the mat board, I don't like the print quality. And that really upset me. I wanted people to say, I don't like the photograph, or the photograph doesn't say anything. I wanted to talk about the photograph. I couldn't talk about the photographs, neither could they. We didn't know how to talk about photographs. It's something you learn over the years. You don't start out with that thing. But I wanted to hear about the image and the content. Is there anything? So towards the end of that semester, the first year of the master's program, I said, I'm going to fix this. You know, I've got my C, I'm going to, 1 more year. There was something I started to realize. I was doing 4x5 at that time. I graduated from the 2 1/4, hoping 4x5 would give me a better print. It did not. It's a horrible thing to try and process if you don't know how to process it. You'll get a print that's the same thing as a 2 1/4, except it's in a bigger format. The prints were one thing, and I knew I was going to have to really learn how to print. And how to print is much more how to develop a negative and get a really special negative. In favor of my advisor, one of the things that he mentioned, and it taught me 2 things. One of them is that there's a wonderful paper that AGFA makes in the heart of Rochester. AGFA makes this paper called Portrait. He says it's a wonderful paper, you should try it. It is. I give him credit for it.
I used it exclusively for
Okay,
somebody.
there we go. It made a difference. Second, he said contrast in a print is not an overall thing. There is a difference between the total contrast of a print and the local contrast. The local contrast of the shadows, the local contrast of the highlights. I give him credit, that's Brad Heinsohn, for 2 observations which were important to me. I think he got that thing right about the 2 different contrast things. It's not a global thing. It's not stretching a rubber band, but it's an inner thing that happens in the photographs. And then, of course, the next thing you do is you go to the basic photo series. Basic photo series is the Ansel Adams set of textbooks where he talks about this as being basic. If you knew this basic, you were a top-notch professional. I mean, this was everything. You know, this has so many different things about printing and developing and seeing and its own system, of course. And there I started to experiment about developing negatives, and I was already looking for a film that had a much richer toe of the exposure area, so I would get more shadows, more detail, more contrast. And the key thing that I learned there was how to split develop a negative so that you could get very high contrast in the shadows while you kept down the high contrast of the highlights. And compact the 2 things, and that, with Portrait paper, that was a bombshell. I mean, it gave prints that were just beautiful. And, of course, you add to that all the local controls of potassium ferrocyanide to bleach and to dodge and to use your hand to warm up areas if you had to and get Parkinson's or whatever it was from it, which I didn't get yet, but one day it might come. But I learned how to print. So I was pretty happy about that. And of course, it didn't matter now if it was 2 1/4 or 4 by 5, but I was on 4 by 5. I wanted the highest quality print. It didn't matter what kind of mat you were on. And I had another thing, and the other thing was much more important. That was that there were a few prints that were good. Not that they were good prints. When I looked over my sea-level photography, right at the end of that year, I started to realize that I was not seeing. One day I was out there, and at a special time of evening, the water, which was usually dark, became light, because it was an overall kind of hazy thing around sunset. And so the whole sky was basically the light for the water, and the water reflecting gave me white water. And the sand, which was usually bright, was dark. So what I was used to seeing as light was dark, and what was dark was light, and it was something that just flipped over, and in a symbolic way, and we read symbols. And somewhere in me, I understood that there was something symbolic about this. We talk about all the dreams that are going on in the book of Genesis. All these dreams. God talks to people in dreams. Maybe most of them are something in the subconscious. But back then, they didn't have an awareness of what the subconscious was. And Jung would talk about that. And I wish Jung was able to talk about the dreams in the first book of Genesis, because so many of them are quite probably not necessarily God talking to everybody, but something in their subconscious understanding that they were going to follow. Whether it was Joseph and his brothers, whether it was Pharaoh, all these different things to predict the future, or the future of Joseph, for instance, as a leader, as somebody who was going to strive in his own way to become the king, or the one who is, the dreamer. The dreamer. And to understand his dreams. It was interesting that Joseph was called by his brothers the dreamer, the Isha Chalomot, Halazehuba, the one with the dreams. But Pharaoh and the Egyptians called Yosaif Tzofnat Paneach. And they related to dreams very differently than the brothers did. They were very practical people. Go into a city that bothered your sister, go in and kill the whole sister. Kill the whole village, and that solves the problem. Joseph was very different. And the Egyptians, when they called him Tzofnat Paneach, the word Tzofnat comes from the word Tzof, and a code. And the Paneach, Tzof, he was able to decode something because he understood something that was going on beyond it, and he had this balance between conscious and subconscious, and being able to realize dreams. So in that second year, I saw that there was this symbolic thing, and somewhere I should have I understood it, that it was such that what's out there, I don't see anything. I mean, what I could see one day, which was totally extreme, that black was white and white was black, if you only were able to see it that way, I said, I've got nothing to lose. I looked at my prints, and I saw that the few pictures I liked were ones in which there was something new, something different, something I hadn't noticed before. And all the rest were pictures that I was looking for. I was out there collecting pictures. We go out there and we take pictures. It's a very clear term. You take a picture. It's got nothing to do with expression. It's really got not much more to do about learning or discovery or any of those things. You find a picture and you take it because that's what you're looking for. It's similar to all the things that you know. It's a beautiful picture. We come home with it. We take it. That's not what I do in photography, and that's not what I teach. When I'm out there photographing today, and in that second year of my master's thesis, I said, I'm going to go out to learn to see, to discover, and to realize things that I've never noticed before because I'm failing. There's nowhere, I have nothing to lose. The idea of a photograph as going out and collecting it, I wasn't getting anything. And yet there were the 3 or so photographs that there was something new. Go out and look for something new. So one of the things that I used to do then, and I do today, take a place and I randomly sit there and say, okay, do your exercise. And the exercise is this. You don't move from that chair. You're going to die there until you see something new. It doesn't matter where you are. Discover something new. Notice something new. And so then you start taking a frame and going like this, or if you want something smaller, you go like that. You've got a zoom lens and you frame it, and you look, and you look, and you listen, and you try, and then all of a sudden, after looking for long enough, you realize that there's stuff out there, and that what you're looking at, it doesn't really matter what, is framed. It's a composition. And usually it's a good composition. Doesn't matter what you're looking at. It's just that you aren't able to accept it as a composition because it's not subject matter. It's something you never would have photographed. You're not at all interested in it. And that's not how you make a composition because we know all the rules. And that's why when they taught me photography and they said, go out and make a magazine cover, it was the worst assignment you give somebody. Because it's saying, you have the knowledge and the ability to go out and do a cover of Life magazine. What an insult. An insult to all the photographers who do the cover of Life magazine, and an insult to you as a person, saying, you've come to this school and you know. If I know, then there's no reason for me to go to this school. The fact is you don't know. And the teachers there should have done what I like to do with students and said, we don't know how to see. We have to learn how to see if we are going to improve and climb that next step. Because until then, everything that we are going to do is something that's going to come from our common knowledge. It's not going to always be common, but it's going to be pretty well what I did the first year. I was above the rest for 1 year. That's what I was able to show, and they said, hey, you're good. You know, you get the A. But in the second year, everybody caught up. We were all the same. And then we were all stuck. And if you were still expressing yourselves, which everyone was doing, and that's what we were taught to do, you were in trouble. Because either you had a certain other understanding that you would use and go beyond what everyone else would do, or you're trying to express yourself and you don't know what to say. You know, and I'll stand in front of a class and they say, we want to express ourselves. And I say, okay, here's your chance. Tell me, what do you want to express? And that's a great way to get a quiet classroom. You know, about what? What do I have to say? You know, the answer is, truth is you don't have anything to say beyond what everybody else knows. What do you want to express? But this is a slogan that we learn. When we think of the pyramid of learning and producing something, you've got a couple of wonderful TED Talks. And one of them is about how to sell by a fellow named Sinek, S-I-N-E-K. It's worth seeing, and I show it in my classes. And he talks about selling. He says you can't sell a computer because of the hardware that it's got, how the memory it's got and stuff. He says, you want to sell something, I have a dream. Now that's interesting. Not because of the computer. And he talks about Martin Luther King, that he got so many people to come on that evening or on that day, not because it was something that everybody didn't know, but because he was able to talk about a dream. What's the dream in photography? What's the dream in art? What is our purpose in doing art? And if we can get to that purpose as the top of the pyramid, instead of talking about the product of the photograph, I want the photograph. Well, my answer is, I don't care about the photograph. I don't want the photograph. I said, in this class that I do in Italian, on the first day, we understand very, very clearly that what this class is about is not about the product. It's about me. It's about learning. Not me, Yosaif, but me, the class. Me, every single person. That the whole concept of art is about discovery. It's about adventure. It's about learning how to see, becoming aware of life and connecting with it. This is exactly what artists, who are great artists, say. Edward Weston says it over and over in his daybooks, and one of the most exciting things he says in this is when he talks about self-expression. And this is something that I would show my students at Pizzala for many years already. Self-expression, he says, the more of it that you put into your work, no matter what the art is, the more self-expression, the more you weaken your images. He says art is not about self-expression. It's about adventure. It's about discovery. It's about becoming aware and sensitized to yourself constantly. New things, new things. He says, if you would ask me about a picture that I just took, I don't like to use the word taking pictures, but if you would ask me about a photograph that I just made and what it means, he says, I probably wouldn't be able to tell you. And he says, if you ask me why I take it, I probably wouldn't be able to answer you that either. Why did you photograph it if you don't know what it means? I wouldn't be able to answer you. My work is always a few steps ahead of me. It's stuff that I don't really understand, I don't really know. The whole concept of discovery and sensitization is exactly that. It's touching something new and trying to connect with it. And when I have students today, and I do teach a course in street photography for the last 4 or 5 years, and I'm doing it my way now, because it's not in the photography department, but rather it's the foreign student exchange unit, and my direct superiors are the 2 people who run the program and know absolutely nothing about photography. I finally have that freedom to do what I want. And in the first day of class, after I read to them and give them the theory, what we have is this understanding that in this class we are not going to express ourselves. And I don't care about photographs. I want you to go out and see new things, discover, be aware, look at things. And we have all kinds of exercises, and they start. And most of them, or many of them, have no knowledge in photography, and all of a sudden they start coming in with that spark in their eye of discovery and adventure. And they're starting to notice things, and it doesn't matter where, because they do the same exercises of learning how to see, and they don't care about the result, because they realize that the real result is not the image. It's about learning how to see and trying to figure out where you are in life and understanding your connection with it, with the use of a camera, which is the closest instrument in terms of all the different art forms that I know that can really touch life and cut a slice of time and space and being, so that you can sit and study and listen and learn. Something you can't do with other mediums. The idea of freezing a fraction of a second so that you can look at it for an hour and study all of the rhythms and all of the dialogue and all of the connections and come to a certain feeling at the end of 15 minutes of looking at an image and say, that is true to life. And it means something. And it's like that. Life is like that. In the other room, the photographs that I have are about the same thing. They're about the journey in each of the different projects that I took. That this one, I'll pass it around. This photograph was number 2 out of 1,000 images that I took with a 5x7 camera. A 5x7 means that the size of the negative is half of the size of the inner frame of this picture. This is enlarged twice. It's twice the size of the negative, this picture. So it's a beautiful old looking camera. It's about, not much, it's about 110 years old, and it's such a delight to hold in your hand this handmade camera with the bellows from back then that is so soft and wonderful, and it's this love affair, you know, and you go out and you photograph, and this was the first thing I came back with when I was finally in an area which I felt was exciting to me, and that it was so complicated and so wonderful that I had subject matter that matched my life experience and was beyond it. In Israel, we have a problem that it's very sparse out there in nature. You don't have many places where everything is so compact because there just isn't enough water for that. You can't have a forest that's dense like the ones that we're used to or would like to have. And Nachal Katlav had it, and a few other Nachalim. And this was a key photograph. Here's some other ones that I did in Nachal Katlav that followed. This was already after I was learning to see. This was in the beginning relatively. No, it wasn't so much in the beginning. But that first one was baffling. This was maybe years ago. I worked in there for a couple of years. I was in Nachal Katlav for, I don't know how many hundreds of hours, maybe, I don't know if it was 1,000 hours. I really never figured it out exactly, but there were days there I'd go in the morning and come back at night. That one picture of the tree, which was negative number 2, was amazing to me because I came home and my habit is when I'm trying a new subject that I don't know and I'm experimenting and trying to figure things out, what I would do is I would take, in a case like this, at least 30 negatives or 40 negatives before I'm going to develop any of them. Because I want one good one. I want one that I can look at and say, this is new and interesting and special. It's worth continuing the project. Because if I did 10 and none of them were good, I'd probably drop the project right from the beginning. So there's nothing there for me. So I would take a lot, develop a batch, and this batch baffled me because I never had it really happen before in this way. Most of them were exciting, and one of the things that was exciting was the light, the colors, and that one in particular. One of the, who's got it? The number 2. You got it there? Hold it up.
Here.
That one of the tree, that one. I came back, I made a print, and I asked myself, where the hell are these colors coming from? I didn't take this picture. It was much too much for me. It was beyond what I could understand and see. This was not mine. And the next picture was like that, and the next picture was like that. And I've been dealing with the Israeli landscape for 30 years, photographing it on and off in different ways. I never saw light like that before. And I was wondering, where did it come from? So I went to a close friend of mine, Kenny Lester, who died 2 weeks ago, and I asked Kenny, Kenny, where are these colors coming from? And he looked at these prints, because he was a fine photographer with a knowledge of color and a sensitivity of the soul and heart. And he looked at him, he says, they're coming from you. I said, that's nice, like go take that to the bank, they're coming from me. It doesn't work like that. A camera doesn't work like that. They're not coming from me. He says, so they say, well, it's from the split developing that you use, because you're the only ones doing split developing in color. That's where it's coming from. I said, maybe a little bit, but not that. Because I've been doing split developing for many years, and I never got colors like that. I said, where are these colors coming from? And I looked at that photograph, I don't know how many hours. I'd pick it up for 5, 10, 15 minutes, look at it, I don't know where it's coming from. Go back. There's only one way to find out. I took a pile of prints like that, the first group. I went down to the Nachal, only with these pictures. I sat in front of all these places, and I looked at the photograph, I looked at the place, and I said, it's not there. The picture's much better than the place. It's much more exciting. It's got, where are these colors coming from? And slowly I learned to see them because they were there, not at all times. You had to catch the right time of day because it was this very elusive thing. It was like a dance. You have to come when they're performing. You can't come after the performance is gone and after the stage is empty, but the light there was magic. You could see it the first time you go down there, you just don't understand why. And it's not a feeling of understanding. When you feel magic, it's a feeling, but you have to be able to eventually put it into words and know how to repeat it and where to look for this thing if it's going to come in certain places. Because as spiritual as you might feel it is, it's still going to be about light and where it comes from. And I had to figure this thing out in order to find more places like that and in order to be able to see this in the continuation of my life. If I was to look back at all of my teachers, and I had some really good teachers. Eugene Smith visited us once, and in one sentence, he taught me so much. Someone asked him, finally, and this was not when the master's class was with him, because we were all master's students. And when we had him for the first hour by ourselves, which was a chupar, as they say, from the photography department, we got him for the first hour, and then all the rest of the department comes in. They're standing room only. We're sitting. We're master's students. We're great. We're smart. We didn't know anything. They come. We're sitting with Gene Smith, this marvelous person, amazing. I mean, this guy radiates something so special. Someone asks him the question, which is a very simple and very profound question. Mr. Smith, what should we learn here at RIT? What should we learn? It's a very smart question to ask. He answered it like that. He said, learn 3 things: honesty, understanding, and passion. That's it. Years ago, Stieglitz was asked a similar question by a woman photographer who asked him, do you think I have potential? Do you think I have talent? Will I be a good photographer? And he asked her, were you ever in love? And she said, yes. Then you can photograph. So there's a lot of people who are going to answer this thing in different ways. But the idea of the passion and the understanding, how do you learn understanding? How do you learn passion? How do you learn honesty? These are things that you have to learn and discover. So around these different things, I was able to slowly construct a teaching method which incorporated a lot of this stuff, so that when we go into a classroom together in terms of what I do in Bezalel now, or when I go out and photograph, I'm trying to learn these things. And my best teacher of all was Nachal Katlav, by far. It taught me more about seeing than any other teacher that I had. And there was another project that taught me so much about seeing, and this was done very early in my career, and this was an exhibit that was in the Tel Aviv Museum in 1977. It's these photographs. These photographs followed a series that's in the other room. I think I might have some of them. I saved some of them. No, they're in the other room. You'll see them. They're photographs that were done from a moving bus. That too was a discovery. It was right after a war in the beginning of the 70s, went in 75 or so, and I was really upset about the whole country because, I don't know if I got my bags out of the port by then, 5 years later. You used to wait for all this stuff. You waited for a telephone for about 7 years, and you were lucky if you got one, and you were thankful, And if you talked too long to Chutz La'aretz, the operator would get on and say, get off the phone because you're talking too long. Stuff like that. That was way back then, and you were upset with all the bureaucracy of how do you buy a car. I remember that clearly. You go into Peugeot. And he says, what car? Well, do you want to buy a car? It's sitting here. And I says, well, I want to see one. He says, why are you coming here if you don't know what it is? Like when you know about it, when you want to buy it, come back. I'm the distributor. I don't have to show you nothing. I figured this is service. This is, this is the way to buy a fortune worth of a car. And so I was upset coming from this dad. I was ready to criticize everything because in that war afterwards, all of a sudden the prices of eggs went up. And it turned out that during the war there were no eggs to be found. But after the war, as much as you wanted, it just the price went up. And everybody was upset. There was a lot of criticism in the air. And I was part of it. I went out to criticize because I had a lot to say. And I wanted my stuff out of the port after 4 years, I'm kidding. I don't know how long it took, but it was an exorbitant amount of time. So I go out and I'm trying all these ways to criticize, and I don't know how to criticize anything in photography. Photography isn't about words. In words, we can criticize anything. But in photography, how do you do it? So I went out and I tried. I tried it for quite a few years afterwards. Finally, I gave up on it. I couldn't do it. But on the first time I went out, I figured, after trying a couple of different things and none of them really worked, why don't you try doing it from a moving bus? Because then nobody's going to see you. You're right next to them. Those were the days when you could lift the window of the bus and you could photograph out the window. Today you can't. You can break the window, but you can't lift it. And I would be photographing out the bus. And again, I took something like 20 or 30 rolls of film before I developed them. And sure enough, right from the beginning, and there's one of those out there, of this woman sitting alone on a bus bench, and she looks like, well, hell, I mean, she looks like she's had it. And it touched me in a special way, you know, these moments that I was seeing. I mean, and I had this idea of going out to criticize, and I saw something just the opposite happening in the first contact prints. There were these wonderful, sensitive moments that people were living life and trying to deal with the reality of it, and they were beautiful. And so I said, to hell with the original idea, I can't do it anyway. Let's go on this. This is absolutely wonderful. And that became a series that was kind of the opposite of Cartier-Bresson, in that I felt that every moment in life can be special. You don't need that one moment when everything works out. I want every other moment. I want, you know, just sitting with a cup of coffee around the table. I don't need that great big thing. The quiet moment. It's not the vacation, it's everyday life. And that's what I wanted in those photographs afterwards. I wanted to discover that. It was a project of love. It was something where you go out and you see this marvelous thing, this theater of life that's happening all around you when you're looking out the window of a bus, and it was absolutely wonderful. I worked on that for 2 years. The biggest problems I had with that was not the intensity. The intensity was awesome. I mean, you had to be so focused in that fraction of a second that you see it, you respond to it intuitively, you know it's right, and you frame it, and you're moving, and you're panning with it, and you do it as exact as possible, and within a second or so you've made all your decisions, it's gone. You know, that wasn't the problem. The problems were when you get into Tel Aviv and you take a bus from Tel Aviv, the driver says, "Where are you going?" Because the fare was different if you were going to a short place or to a different place. This was done. This wasn't Eget. And I said, "I'm going to the last stop." I didn't know where the hell the bus was going. I just got on the bus. Didn't matter what the bus was. I just wanted to look out the window. You know, and I'm not a kid. I'm already a father and the teacher and stuff. And I say, "I'm going to the last stop." He says, "Well, where are you going?" See, he knew something I didn't know. He knew where the last stop was. I said, "I told you I'm going to the last stop. Charge me for the last stop." He says, "But where are you going?" And this kept going back and forth. Finally, I said, "Listen, I don't know where the hell I'm going. I just want to go to the last stop." You know, okay. So he takes me out to this last stop, which was on some beach out in the middle of nowhere. At night, it was probably a good stop to go to, but I didn't know about that yet. But this place, finally I get to the beach. He says, "This is the last stop," and there's nobody left on the bus, and you don't know why anyone would have this as the last stop. I had no idea. And I asked him, I said, "Where's the bus going back?" That did it. He says, "He got out of there as fast as he could, you know." I had to learn how to deal with that. But for me, a day's work, and I lived up near Haifa at the time, was getting in the bus from Kiryat Tivon, going up to Haifa, photographing all the way on one side of the bus, on the right side of the bus, because that's where you get you don't get the traffic and everything, you just get all the things that are on the side. Get to Haifa, get downtown. Now I take the bus up to the top of the Carmel, then I turn around, take the bus back down, then back down there, I go home. That's a day's work, about 20 rolls of film or something like that. That's how Gary Winogrand and Friedlander used to evaluate a day's work by, did they finish all their pockets worth of 35 millimeter film? And then I would have stuff to develop and print, and it was this exciting thing. It was a wonderful project of discovery, of learning. And then afterwards, with all those different wonderful blurs that I was seeing, I said, I need more. I want more. I want to control these blurs. And I was very limited with that one click of a camera. And I knew from theory that there was another camera out there that could do even more things than that. And that was the Widelux, which is a panoramic camera that scans. I think goes around and scans a picture, The lens is on a turret, it spins around, and it photographs you. If it's got a slow enough shutter speed, it takes almost 2 seconds to go from left to right. And when I was talking about this at the exhibit in the museum, all these photographers wanted to, how did you do it? You know, how did you do it? It wasn't a question of how to do it, it was why to do it, but they want to know how to do it. And I'm up there talking to the group of people. I said, you want to know how to do it? I'll show you. And they're all listening intently. And I show them the camera and I say, watch the lens. And it starts to photograph half of them. And then I flip the camera upside down and the thing starts going backwards. So the picture is basically all these people looking at me very seriously. And one half, and then in the middle there's a spin, and the rest of them, everybody's upside down. Because it's got both. But that gave me an option of a new way of seeing, and of seeing things that you could never possibly see. So I had wonderful parents. I said, Mom and Dad, you know, I really need this camera. Would you buy it for me? It was like the price of a Nikon F, which was a lot of money for me. And they bought it. You know, they didn't ask questions. They always, this wonderful support, anything I needed. So I get this wide lux. I never saw it before in my life. I never knew how to use it or what. And I go out and I start with it. And I know I'm going to have this great learning process. And these are some of the images that impressed me. There's more in the other room for you to see, but 2 in particular. This one was first, because I went out for a period of time and just experimented with the camera. I said, I know blurs. I've been doing them for 2 years. Constantly, and what else can I do? And I went out and played with this camera. And one of the amazing things that I realized in this picture, which I don't like at all, was that I could photograph a bus that was coming. It's there in front of you, and it passed you, all in the same picture. And this is it, you know. It's a crazy kind of bus in this picture, but you see the people inside there and the driver, and the bus is just finished coming towards you, it's leaving, and the rest of it's still coming. And, you know, it was a crazy kind of a thing. Wow, you know, this is bringing me into a different world. This isn't the world that I'm used to seeing. It's something you can't possibly see. And I'm learning. I mean, at this pace, I couldn't really focus on very much else in life other than trying to figure out what's going on with this camera. And then I come across something like this. I'm in a park with my daughter. She's now married with about 17 children, this sweet little girl. And 17, 18, 20, I can't keep track of it. She's like a rubber, like a rabbit. And here you go. But this photograph took me to a different place. This was no longer about what the camera can do. It was about the result. You know, there's something going on here that's bringing you into a different world. Well, you guys stop laughing in the back there. I can't, you know, I look at a photograph like this and I say, this is a world of imagination. This isn't real. You can go into something here which is already going, it's going to touch something inside of you. It's something else. It's not about how else you can physically see, like what the camera can do. It's about something that can happen in your mind with this camera. That it can touch areas of your imagination that you've never seen before in a photograph. And that's where I took it. And I started experimenting with my children. They're the greatest things to experiment with. We all do that. They were great models. They were free. You say, go over there, they go over there. You know, you're the father, you know, you got to take them home. So you go out and you play with your kids, and you take them to these places, and you say, run here, run there, play on this, play on that. And things started to develop that there was something emotional that you could see that had to do with some kind of inner world that was not at all what the outer world looked like. You couldn't possibly see these things. The camera could see it. And then I started to go to a place that I knew about. The Pizzala Academy had taken space. They didn't rent it because it was in ruins. This is a place that's right near the Schneller's Army base. Schneller's is still there, but the incredible factory that the Templars built in 100 years ago. And they were living in that compound of Schneller's, and they ran away in the when the British came in, because the British and the Germans weren't so friendly towards each other at that time. And they just left. And they left this factory intact with bricks that were ready to be fired. And it was this incredibly amazing technological thing. They had these little train kind of things that would move around on rollers, and they had hoists that would bring these little cars or the contents up to the second floor where they would be making the bricks. It was an amazing place, and it was a ruins. Hanan Laskin, who was head of the department, introduced me to it because ceramics was using their kilns that they had there that were destroyed, and it was a wonderful place to teach ceramics, and Bezalel was already spread all over the city because they didn't have any room. And since I knew about this place, I said, I'm going to take my son there and play around there and see what happens there, because it was this incredible place. So it started out with images like this. Images like this. He's in three different parts of this picture. Here's the portrait. Here's his shadow with his legs, his body, and here's another shadow of him in the same picture. This is a very simple picture. And this was very much in the beginning of the series. The pictures got more and more complicated as I learned and learned about this. Pass them around, please. And one of my favorites in the whole series is one that does not have too much of the technique involved, but this one. This one. It's something that touches my heart every time I look at it. It's this idea that you as a father, as much as you would like to promise your child everything, you don't know that, and we know that here. And this was the beginning of the understanding that in this series of work, I was going back to a different place. And it's a place that we were at about 70 years ago, 80 years ago. And the Holocaust that every one of us carries in a little bag next to him was coming out in these feelings of even coming to live in Israel. You have no idea what you can promise your child. You can't promise your child anything. You can just hope. The child doesn't know that. You know that. And that was coming out strongly in this work. At the exhibit, what one of the people told me, one of the women who was at the show, comes over to me afterwards and tells me, "You have succeeded in photographing my worst nightmares." To which I answered, "Thank you." Because that was the best compliment that I could have gotten. The idea that you can, that here you've got a child who's looking at you with the utmost trust and faith, and around him everything is falling apart. And you see it. He doesn't know it. And he's trusting in you, and you can't explain this to him because he's a very, very young child. He's 4 years old. He's 5 years old. He's 6 years old. And when he's 7 years old or 6 years old, there's already another child that in the last pictures of the series are going to come in, where he is going to be leading his younger brother, who also has the blonde hair that he no longer has, and he's not going to have any idea, and you're going to be walking him through this ruins. And this, to me, became this very powerful kind of a thing. I was teaching at that time in Haifa, and I could not face my class and focus on teaching because this was stuck in my mind all the time. I would go to sleep thinking about these images because I didn't understand them. I mean, you're waving a camera around. There isn't a single photograph in the series where I'm looking through the camera. I'm waving the camera. I can't see this picture. I can think of what it might look like that I want this in the beginning, that in the middle, and that on the other side, and I'll hold the camera and guess where that lens is moving and hope that I've got it right. But there were pictures in there that I did that were crazy. Like my son would be up on the floor above me, and there was a hole in the floor. This was a ruined factory. He's up there playing around in the dust, and this little doll or little donkey or a little horse, which I think is a little stuffed donkey. He's playing there with a stick in the dust, and I'm a floor below him, and there's an old drum, an oil drum that's there, and I'm standing on it so that I can reach up and put my hand through the hole in the floor above me and photograph him. And at the same time, I wanted this side of the wall, this long corridor that I was on the first floor, and that side of the corridor I wanted, and I wanted him through the hole. I didn't know what the hell to photograph. I mean, how can you know what's going to look like? You can guess, but this time I had a lot of experience. And I should show you really what I was doing, because it's kind of cute. And they said, okay, keep you awake. I'll show you what I was doing. This is a drum, okay? It's a big drum. And I would be standing on top of the drum, and the whole thing would be choreographed, all right? I knew pretty well what I wanted to do. So I would hold the camera in my hand and bend down like that. I didn't have this to hold on to. I'm on a bigger drum. Bend down and start the thing going, and it photographs that part of the corridor. At this point, I grab it with 2 hands, lift it through the hole in the floor, got my son, snap it down, and photograph the right corridor. What are you going to do? What is this? You know, like, you don't start off photographing with a Widelux camera that you're taking basically a hammer and trying to play music with it. It just doesn't, this is not what this camera was ever designed for. It's a panoramic camera. It's not for holding in your hand and making blurry pictures. But here you take a camera and you do something like that. You put it through a hole in the floor, and then you come down, and what happens is that the darkness of both sides of the corridor looks like ghosts and weird kind of figures, and this kid up there looks like he's in some kind of an embryo, because the whole thing is kind of circular and sack-like. And then you come down and go figure out this picture afterwards when you go home, and you've got 2 weeks of trying to figure out these things. What does this mean? What does it mean? Because you can't go out and photograph another time until you get a hold on what it is that you did up till now. And this is what would occupy me for the 3 years that I was working on this project. Not all the time, but in the beginning, you can't go out and photograph when you don't know what you're doing. I mean, you're experimenting and you're learning and you're learning. I wish for this project to happen again. It was one of the most exciting projects that I did in terms of learning. This, like Nahal Katlav, in that there was so much learning going on and understanding and being able to connect with life and deal with issues. How can you deal with that issue and tell your child? I mean, what can you say to him? How can you explain what it is to be a father and to love a child and know that, you know, the Holocaust is in back of you, and who knows if it's in front of us. I mean, look what's happening in Alon-Shvut today, where I live. You know, we've had 3 incidents. One right before the war, where 3 kids were killed, and 2 in the last month or 2, where there were people killed. What can you promise your child? So I'll tell Tal, for instance, that you can hide. I tell him he can hitchhike. I've got no problem with it, because it's not about hitchhiking. And he's old enough that I can talk to him about it, and he understands. And he knows that he's going to be a soldier soon, and everybody knows what that's about. But you can't tell that to a 4-year-old, 3-year-old kid. And you also have to come to some kind of understanding and deal with it on your own. So this is what my work has always been about, something of discovery, even if it's a project, for instance, the Sukkot project, which I've been working on for many years. That was a project that I did from a completely different perspective, something that I felt had to be done. Somebody should do it. It was something that I felt was absent in the history of Jewish art. I mean, we didn't have photography till recently. And when I look back and to see what is there in the history of art that talks about Sukkot, I want to see how the people celebrated it before. And you get these very simple drawings, paintings, etchings, which some of them are good, but most of them are pretty sketchy. And you get the feeling, or I got the feeling, these are not my people. This is not my people. This is not a Jewish artist. These are not Jewish faces. I don't believe it. So I felt that Sukkot had to be done. I went out and I said, I'll do it. I said, photography is the right medium. We can photograph on Chol Hamoed. We can do a lot. We can do the detail. No other medium can do it like photography. And since I felt nobody was doing it, I took the responsibility. But that was a different kind of a project. And even in that project, the discovery and the connecting with the people became the major issue, and that's what it was. It's about the people and learning and seeing other cultures, other ways of celebrating and meeting with my nation and having this wonderful excuse to come into their lives and into their houses by knocking on their door and saying, I want to photograph your sukkah, and have a sukkah of a little child, I want to have that child. And they would go get him, and they wanted that picture. So this is a little bit about my work, about a constant way of seeing and trying to fine tune the whole idea of how do you teach a philosophy of purpose as opposed to product. How can you get people excited about photographing, I don't care what it is, but to know that it's not the image that we're talking about, that the dream of being an artist is not the work, it's about connecting. It's about, this is your medium in which you connect with life and find meaning in it. And it brings you to the most exciting places that you can't get into without this magical box that has a piece of glass on one side of it and some kind of sensitized image in the back of it. And you go to somebody and say, I've got this wonderful little box. It's got glass in the front and some sensitive thing. Tell me the secrets of your life. And then people do, because they know that this is a proper form of attention. And they want it just as much as you do. So this is one of the ways of how I deal with it. And more my teaching is not at all about the prints. I don't care about the prints. I don't care about, and my students don't either. Because what they're realizing is what they're getting back is themselves. Any questions? Must be some questions.
Do you find your students have difficulty connecting with the art of photography if they're only coming through a digital sort of medium, or as opposed to a film medium like you did? You find there's a difference in the way
I don't think there's any. I don't think that there's any difference at all in certain subjects. I think that digital photography basically has totally replaced film photography, and it includes it. It offers a lot more. It offers a lot more, and it frees me, especially as a teacher, from the problem of getting a good print. The print they come back with the cheapest digital camera is better than anything that we could produce in the darkroom, in the color darkroom at Batzal. I used to teach all that stuff. It took us an hour and a half to get to a print that you could, for half a shekel today.
For that reason, that's why I wonder if you had trouble helping a person to engage like visualization, and Ansel Adams' concept.
I don't
Or do you think it's inherent with the digital image now?
Well, his concept was a function of his time, and Neil is an expert on it. You should ask him that question. But we also have to realize that if Ansel Adams was working today, he'd be doing digital.
Oh, yeah.
And he'd be doing marvelous things that were way beyond what he did then, because he would have much more tools to deal with. But when we were teaching a few years ago, they always stuck me in the darkroom because I was good at it. Why was I good at it? Because I had to be. Because I don't know why they weren't good at it, but it took so much time and learning to get to learn to make a good print. And they said, here's a guy who knows how to make a good print. Teach darkroom. I didn't want to teach darkroom. I never wanted to teach darkroom. I did it with my heart because I knew that there were secrets there.
Well, in the end, you learn that through the process, you learn how to see. In other words,
That's what I was.
if there's an advantage to the analog process, is that it takes so long to get a result that while you're working on it, you're also learning to understand and see at the same time.
That's right.
And so with the digital, because the input is so immediate, the return is so immediate,
You really have to spend time with your
that
image.
you never have
Study.
a chance, if you're not careful, you can end up never analyzing the image itself. So, because you're getting so many images so fast that you have no time to analyze exactly what's going on. So that was a nice thing about
Or to
the
take
internet.
responsibility.
So you said yourself, there are all sorts of techniques to teach. Also in the era of film, just the simple technique of this cutout cardboard, where you put it and make a frame and you take pictures without actually taking pictures. That's an exercise, but it's hard to get people to do that. They get bored with it very quickly because they want results.
Now, people want instant results. Last week, there was a young woman who put out work, and in the critiques that I do, I said, print out as many pictures as you want. This is tabletop, fill with pictures. They only do the small pictures, the postcard. I don't want anything bigger. I don't want any enlargements. I don't want a final exhibit. I just want to talk about the process of what we're seeing, and they know that they've got some. If you want, later on, you'll do it. I'm surely not interested in it. I don't need it. But when you put out work, a lot of times I tell them also put out the photographs you didn't choose. Leave it in a pile. If anyone wants to look at it, they will. If not, not. And I always look at it because I know that I'm going to find stuff in there that's better than anything that they're showing. They're just not ready for it. And that's exactly what happened with this young woman this past week. There was one photograph that was exquisite. It was the kind of thing that any photographer wished they did. It was so complicated. There were so many things going on. And she wasn't ready for it. She just couldn't, just too much. She didn't realize it, but it was perfect. It had all the rhythms of life, and it was just wonderful. She put it in the junk pile. And when we put it in the top ones, because that's what I do, everyone picks the ones that they like and put it up against the wall and back of the photographs. Everybody picked that photograph. And I said, look at this picture. Why didn't you pick it? And she's looking, and all the time I'm talking about it, I'm pointing it at her. She says, I'm starting to see it now. I said, say that again. She said, I didn't spend enough time looking at it. And that's part of what we have to learn, is to spend that time. I don't know if we've answered the question, but to me, it doesn't matter, the media, whether it's digital or negative. I tell them, don't choose a negative because you're not going to have time for it. There's going to be so many things that you're going to learn to see. I don't want you accenting the print. I want you seeing. And it's going to come through. Later on, deal with the technique. Right now, learn to see. Learn to experience, learn to feel, learn to photograph with intuition and the understanding that comes from the subconscious and from the dreams and from something that you know it's right, but you don't know why. And then we'll figure out in words so that next time you'll be able to take it to the next step. Does that answer your question? I never answer a question straight. Any others? Okay. Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you all very much. We can come in the other room here and look
Yeah,
at this work.
actually, I do have a question.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear.
No, well, I didn't say.
Oh.
Will there be a street photography workshop?
Yes.
Well, we're trying to work that out now. If you're interested, we'd like to know about it. But you've had an excellent preview here of what kind of an approach it's going to be. So we just told you.
If I would do such a course, it would be very much what I'm doing at Bezalel. It would be very much what I'm doing at Bezalel, because this is what I believe in. I'm not going to teach something I don't believe in. And street photography would be the physical place. It's got everything. But what we will learn, and what I intend to, in fact, teach, because you can teach techniques. And there's technique of seeing, there's techniques of understanding, of perception, of learning. There are these techniques, and if you learn them, you go up to the next level. And when you do, you go up to the one after that. And there was once a student I had at Bezalel who, this was while I was still in the department, and she says to me, I'm going to miss next week. She says, I'm sorry. She says, I'm not going to be here. I said, it's okay. She says, no, it's not. She says, I want to take another step. Because this was a person who every week was taking another step, and she didn't want to miss that extra step. I said, don't worry, we'll figure it out. What I'm thinking of is about a 10-week course of 2.5 hour meetings, 2 hours, 2.5 hours. I don't know if people can take too much more than that. And they wouldn't necessarily be 1 week after the other because they're in time. I have issues of commitments that also, but it's about 10 weeks, and we do critiques, go out together and look, learn to see. That would be basically what it would be. And I would expect a lot of work. I mean, I tell my students, I want 8 hours of work a week. You go out and photograph for 8 hours. None of them do. But at a certain point, when it clicks, as the Israeli expression, it's a wonderful expression, when the asimon falls in. I don't know if any kids have any idea what we're talking about, but when the asimon falls in, which is after you bang and bang on the box, and it's rattling around, and finally it clicks in, and you get the line, and you say, thank God, because there are no phones in Israel, when the asimon falls, and these guys come in smiling, you know that you can't stop them. And I was telling Neil before that there was one person maybe 2 or 3 years ago, after 2 weeks, 1 week she showed, 2 weeks later she comes in with about 120 pictures. And most instructors won't allow a person to put up more than 3 because you can't critique it. You've got to tear it apart, put it together, and all the crap that they say about nothing. And we used to do that, and my teachers did. They were good at it. We didn't know better. But she came in with 120 pictures. 70 of them were worth exhibiting. It was just amazing. And I look at this and I say, my God, I wish I could do this. And I can't. Because I grew up with all the wrong rules, and she didn't. She didn't start with all of those problems that I had to overcome. This idea of ego and stuff. There's no ego. You go out there and wow, there's just this whole great, big, wonderful, exciting world out there, and I'm discovering it all the time. And it was no problem for her. It is a problem for us, for me. You go out and, what do you have to say? And what's your project? Explain it. Drive it into the ground with theory and what you plan on doing, and you're going to know exactly what's going to happen at the end. I don't believe anyone who says they know what's going to happen at the end. You're going to hit a wall and it's going to tell you left or right. You didn't know that the wall was there, and that wall is up here. Or you go into a bus and you start out with one concept and you come home with a completely different one. And you say, the hell with the first concept. It wasn't worth anything anyway. Look what I've got. I've got gold. You've got something special, wonderful. Something that's just pulling. You can't deny it because you're in tune with that other side, which is the sensitive side of your soul, of the side of the brain where it's emotions, it's taste, it's feeling, it's sensibilities. It's a different knowledge. It's just as valid. Jung talks about that. You really have to read his first chapter, the book of Man and His Symbols. And if you get it, there's 2 editions. There's also in Hebrew, but in the English there's the one which is illustrated, the one which is not illustrated. Illustrated one's fun. It's the same thing. But when he talks about it, he says modern people don't relate to their subconscious. He says we're twisted. We have problems. We can't put the 2 worlds together. That's why we have so many problems. The wonderful part about that amazing book is that amazing book came from one of those dreams. Not that God was talking to him, but his subconscious was talking to him. Someone who he knew very well, who was his publisher, came to him and said, Professor Young, why don't you do a book for the common people? Why is it always for the people who, all the scientific? No, he says, I'm a scientist. No. And when he said no, it meant no. He didn't, you know, it wasn't something. But then the night later, he had a dream. And in the dream, and they write about this in the book, he's standing in front of thousands of people who are listening to him, and they understand. And he listened to his dream. And this was the last project he did before he died. He saw the book in theory. He never saw it published, but he saw all of the articles because he wrote the first 100-page article, and the rest of his book is a lot of his disciples who wrote different categories, and that was how he took the thing. But he did this wonderful, monumental book and an essential kind of reading. You have to do what you believe in. I never answer a question straight. Any other questions that you don't want answered straight?
How do you find young? I mean, we're all here, less young than you, most of your students in Bezalel. How do they relate to?
Well, I'm not sure if that's an insult.
No, I was not. I was just mentioning a fact.
I think that when as soon as we're ready, it doesn't matter. I think young people have a hard time not following rules. You tell them do something different. It's again, it's not at all what you're used to. They have a hard time with it.
Do what you
Adults
like.
know that we don't have to follow any of the rules, so we can allow ourselves that. I think also that life taught us that we don't really know, and that there's plenty of room not to know. We go out and learn, discover, reconnect. It's very refreshing. So I don't think that age is at all an issue, as long as you remember where your camera is and that you have film that you have to photo, develop or make prints of. But I don't think age is an issue. But you've got to work. That's the thing. I think that one of the things.
It's not so much age as much as experience, or.
I don't care about it. Everyone's
No, the experience. Then what you say, the experience. Enough experience to know that the rules are there merely basically as a suggestion, not more than that.
I think that that'll have to be an individual thing. That people have to basically decide if they're ready to rediscover life and rediscover all kinds of things that they thought were closed. Just the idea of saying, I don't know what a composition is. That everything is a composition. And we just have to look at it long enough and see that it's valid. Now that's a hard thing for anyone to accept. But it's something wonderful to accept. That just because we've got these rules of what a composition is doesn't mean that everything else is not. There are a lot of places that one of them we'll go to, which is a parking lot not far from here. No matter how you hold the camera, everything's a composite. It's just amazing. You just photograph with your eyes closed. You go wrap it a couple of times around, and you've got your project done. Wonderful imagery.
Sorry, that was my first project in Hadassah. To take it without looking, hold your camera in the back and
all of
take
these
without
things
looking.
were based on intuition. Intuition is based on knowledge. And then for 2 weeks you try to figure it out, but your work is, as Weston said, it's always a couple of steps ahead of you. You have to figure it out.
I happened to see you one day, I think in Tel Aviv, taking three-dimensional pictures.
That's probably true. I have a 3D camera. I've been using it a
Can you
lot.
say something about this technique?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Pardon?
Can you repeat the question?
The question is about 3D photography. He caught me that I take 3D pictures, and Tal does also. Tal, as a matter of fact, is almost a whole exhibit of Point Lobos that we photographed together in 3D, and they're wonderful images. Tal was a partner also in these. We photographed these together, and the exhibit is both of ours. I did hard work with the camera, and he looked through it and said, yeah, I like it. And as soon as he said he liked it, we were partners on it. So we shared this project very well. It wasn't always easy because to sit and to be in one place for so long. But you should see the amazing text that he wrote for the exhibit. The exhibit was in Nahal Katlav. Down in the Nahal, that's where we showed the photographs. What was the original question?
3D photography.
3D photography. 3D is amazing. It's to me not at all a gimmick. It's a very difficult thing because we see 3D, it's just like what we see. It's not removed from it. But many years ago, when color started to come in strong, and we started teaching color at B'Tzalel, one of the questions was justify color. Justify it. You know, black and white is so poetic and wonderful. Justify color. And my thought was, what a stupid question it is. Justify black and white when you can now do color so well. And the same thing I asked about 3D. In the beginning, when I started to photograph 3D, the first batches and batches of work that I would do were, and it's with a simple camera, it's a 3D camera, Fuji camera. The first thing that you do is try and exaggerate the 3D and say, wow, look how three-dimensional this is. And then I said, wait a second, I don't have to justify it. I'm going to use it. The justification for me, to a certain extent, came while I've been doing Sukkot only in 3D now. I've dropped the big format and everything else. And even though the pictures aren't going to be that sharp and they'll be small, they're 3D. And I was in Mea Sharim and was photographing it turned out, the son of one of the big rabbis in the Haredi Mea Sharim community. This was the Spinker Rebbe's son that I was photographing. Did anyone hear of the Spinker Rebbe? You didn't? Neither did I.
He was my great-grandmother's cousin.
There we got somebody there. Okay. There are 3 Spinker Rebbe's I learned. One in Tel Aviv, Haifa, Jerusalem, but the Jerusalem one's the real one.
Like anything else in Jerusalem.
Well, of course. Well, it turned out after I finished photographing, he says, by the way, I'm the son of the Spinker Rebbe. So he was the son, and his son was about a couple of years younger than Tal. He was around bar mitzvah age, maybe he was 12 years old. And I went into their sukkah. This was about 1 o'clock in the morning. On sukkah, these guys do what they like. They're out there walking with their family and the babies and the carriages and all till the middle of the night. They're having the greatest time. You should walk around on Sukkot Chol HaMoed at night and Mea Sharim around there. It's like it's this pageant. Everybody's out there walking all over the place. There's no such thing as day and night on Sukkot. Kids stay up as long as they want. So at 1 o'clock, I said, it was actually 12:30. I was so tired. I just wanted to go home and go to sleep. I was just, photograph after photograph. And I said, that's it. I'm not going to look into any more courtyards. I'm not going to see any more pictures. I'm going home. There's always going to be a photograph that you're going to miss. I'm walking along towards wherever I thought I'd parked the car because you never know where you are there. And I'm trying to find my way back. And I go past an entrance of a house, and sure enough, there's a light coming from a sukkah. And in those sukkot, it's a white cloth on which they put decorations. And I get a hint of it. And I said, gotta take a look. I said, you're a photographer. You're a photographer. Go take a look. No matter what I do, go in and look around. Incredible sukkah. This is already 12:30 at night. I look in the entrance, and I'm standing there because I know what's going to happen. This marvelous decorations that was done by an adult. Everything's exactly perfect and hand done with so much patience and love. Only an adult could do it. This was a Spinker Rebbe's son who did it. And I go in there. All of a sudden, he comes out and he says, "Can I help you?" I said, "Well, the truth is, that I came. What are you looking for?" I said, the sukkah was calling me. I just had to come in and take a look. It's absolutely amazing. It was just so beautiful. I'd love to photograph it. So, by all means, photograph it. He was happy. He decorated. He wants that attention. And so I'm starting. Where are you starting? Okay? I know that's not enough. So I start photographing, And as I'm photographing, I say, would you be willing to be in the picture? Oh, no. You can photograph the sukkah. We're not going to be in the picture. All right. I photograph. And he starts looking at the picture in the back of the camera. Now, the screen in the back of the camera, you see 3D. You see the image is three-dimensional, and without anything else, you don't need glasses or anything. You see color, 3D. It's amazing. He looks through the back of the camera. Wow, you know. His wife comes over and looks at him. And she starts the show going. I'll tell you. What happens is, I tell you, I finished photographing. Saw the pictures, they're absolutely wonderful. And I said, there's only one problem. I said, I can't use it. As beautiful as it is. It's like a soul. It's like a body without the soul. I said, soul is you people. You have to be in. I said, without you in the picture, I've got just a beautiful picture. But there's no soul in it. I mean, in the sukkah, yes, but I want the beauty. I said, well, maybe my son can be in the picture. So his son's sitting at the table. I take a few pictures of the son. Now the wife comes out. And I show her, I say, take a look at your son. She looks in the back of the camera. She sees it in 3D, and she starts going, wow, das ist emes. Das ist emes. Now, I never thought of it like that. The idea of emes is not reality. It's truth. It's something more than what it looks like. She put it in a different concept than I was ready for. And she was going nuts. I mean, what? She wanted to see. And finally, I said, come on, get in the picture with your son. He says, I don't want to be in it. We don't get photographed. I don't want people seeing us. And I answered him, I already learned. You see, don't start trying to squeeze out of that sound. Well, show it to anyone. That never worked. I said, I want everybody to see it. You know, like, what kind of answer would say, you're not going to convince me like that. I don't want anyone to see it. You want everyone? I say, don't you see this beauty? Don't you see how wonderful this looks? I want everyone to see how special these people are. How special Am Yisrael is that we celebrate our Sukkot with such beauty and pride. We don't have to hide. We have to show this to everybody. Wow, put it in a different light. This guy smiles, son, good, you got me. He sits down, okay?
You probably didn't say that.
Huh?
You probably didn't quote you on that one.
You can't. But that was the look in his eye. He said, you got me, you got me. And so he's sitting down. Thank you. He's sitting down and he's smiling. He looks at his son, and his son looks at him. And obviously they love each other. And you get that special look of father to son, smiling at each other. And I said, that's it. This is what I came for. And so now I try the next step. The grandfather, not the Spinker Rebbe, but the mother's father who was there. And this guy's super important. And I look at him and I'd say, really, 3 generations together, it's really important. You'll get this file. You'll get all these pictures. And they in fact did afterwards. They copied the whole damn thing. Every picture I took of Sukkot that year was in there. Download it, do what you want with it. I said to the father, why don't you get in there? You'll get this picture. It's so important. He looks at me like he wants to burn a hole through me, like you even dare ask the question. Because I asked the son to try and convince him. He said, no, I'm not going to ask him that question. You ask him that question. And he looked at me like that. I said, okay. He said, no, I'm sorry. You don't want to be in the picture. Don't have to be. It's too bad. This is grand. This is a picture you're going to want. I said, I'm sorry, you don't want it. It's okay. I said, I got a wonderful photograph. Well, I'm still taking pictures of the father and the son, Hope. And quietly, just quietly, all of a sudden, he comes and he sits down at the table. But he's not going to look at me. He's not going to look at me. He's going to look at the side like you got, and the son in the meantime is looking at me. You did it again. He can't hide his smile. He says, you did something I couldn't do. And I'm giving a Dvar Torah all the time because I have a couple of special Dvar Torahs that are kind of new and different and strange. And I'm giving my Dvar Torah all this time, talking to them. And all of a sudden I get to the key point in the Dvar Torah. And he looks up at me. There's a famous picture that Yosaif Cohain did of Churchill. Right after, when he asked Churchill, would you please get that smelly cigar out of your mouth, because I want to photograph you. And at least this is the legend it goes with it. Churchill looks at him and says, wait, you're the only person that ever asked me, who the hell are you? And he goes over to, Karsh goes over to Churchill with his hand on the bulb of the air pressure thing that sets off the camera, yanks the cigar out of his mouth, and at the same time takes the picture, okay? That was the same look that I got from this fellow. He was looking at me and saying, where the hell does this Dvar Torah come from? He says, I can't refute it. It's totally. And he's looking, and I photograph, and of course I keep talking at the same time. I take another one and another one. Finally, I stopped because I said, "That's it. I know I've got it." I said, "I'm sorry, brother." I said, "I apologize. I had to take the picture." I said it was wonderful, and I explained to him. I told him about the picture of Karsh, and he smiled. I got him to smile. And any picture I took afterwards wasn't as good, and I thanked him. And the wife was looking at das Zemes the whole time, and it was a wonderful thing. So you asked me about 3D. Did I answer you? That would not have happened another way. It wouldn't have happened. It's a kind of connection. I went into another sukkah with the bells. I didn't realize it was the bells. I go in there and I asked the first guy, I said, am I welcome in this sukkah? Because there was 1,000 to 1 there. I mean, I knew that if I was in trouble, I was in deep trouble. So I asked, am I welcome in this sukkah? I said, yes, you're welcome in this sukkah. I said, please go to your Rebbe and ask him if I can photograph. And they did, and the Rebbe said yes. I said, okay, I'm safe. I go in there, and within 5 minutes, everyone's crowding around the camera. They want to see 3D. And they want to be photographed in 3D so that they can see themselves in 3D. It was a wild thing. It was just crazy, you know. So sometimes, a 4x5 camera, you set it up, you take the black cloth, and you wait, and you know things are going to happen because this is what they call in Hebrew an iruah. You've got something special happening. People want to be part of it. Well, today's digital cameras are so common, and you know, like no one wants to be part of it. But when you show them a 3D image, it's completely different. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's some other pictures in our room there. You can see some of the faces.
If anybody wants, we have
A little point of information you might be very interested in. So, familiar with my background, because it's not quite family in Auschwitz.